Hey everyone, it's Austin back again with another video for Human Ideals. In this video, I just wanted to share a bit about my own spiritual journey in this moment in time, and just a little bit about the challenges I've come to face over the years as a spiritual seeker and how they've inspired my mission for Human Ideals and where it is today. To start off, I just want to share a bit about my own childhood and some of the influences that have shaped my journey. Right. So growing up, as some of you may already know by now, I was raised in a devout Theravada Buddhist household. My mom, when I was young, right around when I was in 4th grade, she used to send me to a Buddhist Sunday school. I would go there every week, study about Theravada Buddhism and the basic principles, and I did fairly well. But during this time in my life, Buddhism didn't really have much of an effect on me, mainly due to the fact that spiritual enlightenment and the path as a whole wasn't really all that relevant. You know, as a child, I wasn't suffering all that much, and the reason why any spiritual seeker takes on the path is to alleviate suffering, right? I mean, duh, like, you know, why else would anyone take on the path? But anyways, that doesn't mean I wasn't aware of my own suffering. I would say that, you know, even in 4th grade, like any kid, I experienced my own hardships in terms of, like, speaking of my social life, right? Not as much as in middle school or high school, but I remember when I was young, I used to be bullied a little bit. There was this one guy who used to pick on me and my 2 friends, but then that was pretty funny. But it wasn't that big of a deal, you know. We still fooled around, played our little games at recess, as any kid would. But you know, in light of what I was learning in Buddhism, that kind of, I guess, planted the seeds for the path in my subconscious, even if I didn't know what to do with those teachings yet, and how to look at life and its suffering. You know, when I was young, my grandma used to always read to me like Buddhist scriptures and whatnot, and tell me, like, just plant into my mind all the time about old age, sickness, and death, old age, sickness, and death. And I guess, you know, my mom kind of wanted her to do that, and I didn't really think too much of it. Surprisingly, it didn't seem like it was all too preachy, but at the same time, like, I just didn't have an opinion of it because it wasn't relevant. I just thought, okay, whatever. You know, I was born in this Burmese household. This is what Burmese people do, so I just went along with it. I didn't really like going to monasteries, but, you know, like, even now it can seem kind of tedious, but yeah, anyways, like, at this point in my life, Buddhism just wasn't all that relevant. Anyway, this part of my life wasn't too interesting, so I'll skip to the next part, which is me moving back to Myanmar back in 2010, when I was in middle school. Now, this is when things really started to get shaken up. Now, going back home to Myanmar, I was born here in the U.S., lived here for 10 years, but moving back to Myanmar was kind of a life-changing experience, in that, you know, I had to start anew, and I had to start a new social life, even though I was in 5th grade, which you couldn't really call that big of a social life anyways. At this moment in time, one of the biggest catalysts to my spiritual path, even though I wouldn't start the path until I was in, you know, like, seriously started until my senior year of high school, so like 7 years later, one challenge I was facing at the time in moving back to Myanmar was trying to fit in. And so one of the coping mechanisms I adopted, you know, subconsciously without me knowing, was trying to put on a fake persona, something that could, a people-pleasing sort of persona that would get me to be noticed. Whether it was good attention or bad attention didn't really matter. You know, I just wanted people, you know, to be recognized. In 5th grade, it wasn't all too bad because, you know, I would try to make friends like, you know, any normal kid would. Yeah, it wasn't, anyways. Some of my own issues, like my own inner psychological issues, weren't too pronounced. yeah, so 5th grade wasn't all too interesting, but then in 6th grade, things kind of took a turn for the worst. Some of my friends know that I kind of acted up, not in like a misbehaving way, but kind of a really obvious, like, insecure validation seeking way. Like, I would garner both good and bad attention, and sometimes it would take a turn for the worse. It was, yeah, pretty embarrassing to say the least. Anyways, I won't go too much into it, but that, even before I was a serious seeker, like, that pattern of validation seeking was really one of my biggest cruxes, and something that even to this day I still have to catch myself subconsciously and like try to unwire all those like negative habits, like you know personality defects like jealousy, pride, narcissism. Like, I guess we all have it to some degree, but based on what kind of pathological coping mechanisms you've adopted over the past, it can be really hard to unwire even with meditation. So, for all you seekers who are coping or struggling with those kinds of defects, thinking that you're somehow less of a person just because, you can't really, you have to push more, you have to fight harder with your mind to, try to express empathy or compassion. I know I've been there, and again, to anyone who's facing this, I really don't judge you. Even, I guess what I want to say with that is, we all have a capacity for so-called higher consciousness, if you want to put it that way, for compassion and really connecting on the level of our shared humanness. But it can feel like we're closed off from that. It can feel like we're shut off from those higher emotions when we're trying to unwire our negative coping mechanisms. But anyways, I just want to say that, the main message from that is, if you are struggling, don't judge yourself and work through them. But yeah, so anyways, I'm going unrehearsed on this, so if I'm stuttering a bit, you just want to go along with the story. Anyways, sharing different parts of my path, I just want to touch on different principles, like the one just now that I'd like to share. And so, in different phases of my life, these principles that I stand by, the principles that have inspired human ideals, have definitely changed. So, yeah, I guess the first principle in the spiritual path during this point in my life, the validation-seeking point in my life, if you will, is that, once you get out of your insecure phase or validation-seeking phase, it can be hard to unwire those negative feelings, and that the main takeaway is, don't judge yourself. We all have them, but, try to tap into those higher emotions. Try to be more aligned with your true purpose. Try to feel that part inside of yourself that says everything's okay no matter what you're feeling. So that's the first principle, I would say. Okay, now, so moving on. I eventually got out of that phase, that insecurity phase, right around the beginning of my freshman year of high school. My social life pretty much settled down with the very few friends I had. I guess I wasn't really liked or disliked. I guess people just didn't really have too much of an opinion of me, which didn't really matter too much. I just kind of kept to myself. The very few friends I've had over the years, I'm super grateful for. Some people I've connected with really closely. Like, for example, I had this one friend during my final 3 years of high school, Gary Hong. I think we have very similar personalities, so it was nice just to have those really deep, intimate, serious conversations, without just fooling around all the time. Of course, I do like those kinds of casual conversations, but to resonate with someone on a deeper level, that's just, it brings a new light to the meaning of friendship, and that's something I really cherish. But anyways, okay, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so during my 4 years of high school, I guess, I was pretty isolated, and knowing that I didn't really fit in. I think something I kind of told myself is that, oh, maybe it's because I have different needs. I have a different personality type than the people around me, and that's why I can't fit in. But really, even along the spiritual path, that one thing as seekers, we try to build the spiritual identity, or in spiritual circles we would call this the spiritual ego, right? There's the quote. One of my teachers, his name is Zen Lauren, once taught me that, in the path to enlightenment, the final door is your conception of God, or your conception of the highest good, and that oftentimes is your spiritual ego, how you think you'll be seen by other people when you're enlightened. And there's the famous quote, I think it was a Zen quote: if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. The Buddha isn't just other teachers, and one way to interpret it is meeting other spiritual teachers and then learning from them and ultimately transcending them. But another way to interpret it, this is my way of interpreting it, how I've come to see it, is the Buddha is your own spiritual ego, and you have to transcend that to actually get enlightened, as opposed to your own conception, your personality-based version of enlightenment. But anyways, I won't go into that later. I guess you could call it the second principle of the spiritual journey, which is you have to transcend your spiritual ego, even if it's very tempting, even if your vision of enlightenment is super grandiose or whatnot, because that's not really the true vision. That's not really why you're motivated to transcend suffering. It's because you want to tap into those higher values of compassion and altruism, and to live a life that is free of suffering, and to love as much as you can. But anyways, to tap into the higher values, not to receive validation. Even if the spiritual path it's hard to say what your purest motivations are, because your path isn't just influenced by, purely good intentions. I don't think anybody can say that, because subconsciously we do have validation seeking and insecurities and desires and attachments that we're still working through. So we're a mix of both. Nobody's purely good, nobody's purely evil. But anyways, moving on from the second principle, which is that you have to transcend your spiritual ego. During this point in my, okay, what was I going to say? Right. During this point in my life, I kind of thought that I couldn't bond with my peers because I was somehow different from them, when in reality looking back, I realized that I didn't really make too much of an effort to resonate with, their hopes and challenges and what they want to do with their life, even if, I'm not by nature extroverted, or I'm not a guy that jokes around too much, even if I do it sometimes. I'm not really like a happy-go-lucky person. I'm more of, I like to have those, serious, deep, meaningful conversations, and those are a rare occurrence. But it's not because of them. You can't point the finger out there and say, oh, those people aren't deep, those people are shallow and superficial. It's not like that. We have this, in psychology, we learn of this, in-group, out-group mentality. Oh, it's them. It's their fault, and I'm somehow different, and I have to separate from the herd in order to find the highest good, when nothing could be further from the truth. It's our shared humanity. That's when you're on the path to enlightenment, that's what you're really seeking, is what is, the highest purpose of being human? What is the highest goodness of being human? And in order to achieve that, you have to be more relatable, not less. You can't be standing, in a, metaphorical throne, if you will, up in the clouds, and then just pointing orders, down at other people as though you're God, and then they're inferior. It's not like that at all. But anyways, if you want to connect with other people, my point is that another principle is, look beyond your spiritual self and be relatable. Tap into your shared humanity. That was a major takeaway that I only realized, once I really graduated from high school. And something that I've been really tapping into only, within this past year of my, freshman year in college. But anyway, so my What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, oh yeah. So one sec. Okay, sorry guys. Bit of an intermission there. I was kind of thirsty, but okay. So now we're at the point where I actually started my spiritual journey, and I worked through most of my insecurities, even though I'm still dealing with a lot of subconscious, like unwiring, deconditioning stuff. But you know, I'm pretty positive about the path and where I am now. So anyway, so I just want to talk a bit about how I actually got, how my spiritual path was actually ignited, and who inspired me to take the first step. So when I was in 12th grade, you know, due to my own inner issues and whatnot, you know, still feeling, trying to find my highest purpose in life, if you will, my life purpose, and trying to figure out what types of people do I really resonate with. Again, going back to that point of trying to reach out to people and bonding on our shared humanity. You know, this theme of humanity and what the sacredness of being human is a really big thread, has been a really big thread within, especially, you know, within these past 2 years, and that's what inspired human ideals. And, you know, these principles of humanity and life purpose and social change, who inspired me was this guy called, named Leo Gura from, if you know, the famous YouTuber Leo Gura from actualize.org. His whole channel is about spirituality, and more specifically non-duality, or Advaita Vedanta, social change, and personal development. So yeah, I stumbled upon his channel during my senior year of high school. I started to really get invested into his teachings. You know, his videos are like hours long, really heavily packed material. Again, some of his videos on enlightenment are pretty controversial and really out there. So a lot of people disagree with him, but I personally love what he has to say. He's very much ahead of his time. Even if I kind of, you know, question him in some respects, but yeah, he's one of the few people that has really inspired my vision for human ideals. And if you look at the 10-week curriculum in the website Our Vision, you'll see that almost every week has an actualize.org video in it, which is how highly I think of his channel. But anyways, this idea of non-duality. So for those of you who are just starting a spiritual path, you've probably stumbled upon non-duality. You've probably moved on from, you know, New Age teachings to more advanced practices like non-duality or Advaita Vedanta. Now, non-duality means, as you know by the name, it means not two, or, you know, all dualities in the universe or dichotomies are not separable. They are one. The universe is a perfect unity, but this can be interpreted in a lot of ways. But so the way I interpret it, especially how it's relevant to my own spiritual journey, is I was raised, you know, in a Buddhist household, and so you know, my conception of you know, the way I was taught to perceive life is that life is suffering, and that, you know, all the worldly goodness, you know, the sacredness of worldly pursuits in life is negated by old age, sickness, death, separation, you know, all these ailments. And you can see this in our mission for human ideals. Non-duality, the way this ideology has influenced our mission is that, you know, Buddhism is often perceived as a sort of escapist doctrine or otherworldly transcendent doctrine, and that it's the denial of worldly pursuits, even though it you know, it preaches a middle path, or a path between, you know, extreme self-mortification and extreme self-indulgence. It's supposedly a middle path, but, you know, it doesn't really acknowledge the importance of integrating spiritual enlightenment with, you know, worldly activity and social change. And so human ideals is an antithesis to that. Sorry, I just want to take an intermission here. Okay, sorry about that. I seem to be really thirsty today. I'm not sure why. Kind of a raspy throat. But anyways, going back to that. Buddhism is okay. I just want to make a correction on that. Buddhism isn't really perceived as an escapist doctrine. That's kind of something I've added onto it. Growing up in a Buddhist, having been raised by Buddhist parents, even though they raised me to believe, that nirvana is like the highest good and whatnot, which it really is, because you are free from suffering and all attachments. As a kid, I always used to wonder, like, since nirvana is the end of all sensory experience, including, mental activity and being free from literal physical rebirths, if you will, there's a funny story. One time, my mom and this Buddhist monk were chatting about something, and I forgot what it was, and then we were talking about nirvana, right? And then they were talking about how, we're so lucky that the Buddha taught about nirvana, and that, as a regular human being, not being a renunciant or a monk, it was still very hard to. She has a long way to go to attain nirvana. And then it was funny because I asked her, wouldn't nirvana be boring, and then I still remember, like, the monk's reaction was one of, like, it was a mix between amusement and sort of, like, disappointment. It's like, oh, this kid has much to learn about life, it was, like, really naive, which I was, I didn't know anything at the time. That was around when I was, like, I believe I was 10 years old at the time, so yeah, when I was in 4th grade, basically. So, around that time, as you can see, like, a lot of it ties back together, but I didn't know at the time how, that comment about wouldn't nirvana be boring, how that would subconsciously influence my life purpose later on. I mean, like, human ideals means so much to me. Like, this is what I live and breathe day in and day out, why I do what I do in life. Before human ideals, I was my life didn't really have a direction, and for that, I'm super grateful. Just for this mission of whether life can be affirmed, whether the sacredness of worldly activities and the sacredness of being human in general, can it only be reached by denying our desires and attachments, or can it be found? Can the perfection of enlightenment and freedom be found even in our so-called attachments? Can they be transmuted into a higher version of themselves, free from worry and fear and anger and all those negative emotions or whatnot. Another issue with that is, in the spiritual path, there's a difference between the left hand and the right hand path. So basically, the right hand path would be like the conventional Eastern version of enlightenment, like, it's built around renunciation and, cutting off attachments and, like, eliminating attachments to surrender yourself to a higher good, whether that be God or nirvana or whatnot. It's like external authority. It doesn't have to be personified authority, but, surrendering, sacrificing yourself for something bigger than yourself. Whereas the left-hand path, it's not necessarily Western, but it's the path of, it's often called the path of pleasure and power. So, like, it's more like indulgence, right? Like, indulging in whatever cravings you have without restriction, not bowing to external authority other than your own decisions and your own inner wisdom. It's a very empowering path as well. But I think that within the past year, I've come to realize that, these paths aren't really in the back of my mind. I kind of realized that these paths they really shouldn't be separate, and with human ideals, the question is really, why are they separate? Why is the path of seeing the beauty of this world through our desires and aspirations, and why is that so antithetical? Why is our conventional notion of enlightenment so hostile to that? And it's not with a bad reason, like, if we have desires, if we have attachments, we necessarily have things that we hate and fear, and we're kind of We live in a very neurotic state from our aspirations, no matter how high or noble they are. We can't say that we don't have fears, that we pursue our passions fearlessly, because whenever we pursue our passions, we fear that they might get taken away, or we fear that they might not happen. We live in this very neurotic, time-bound state of mind, in a constant state of doubt and fear. And so one principle of human ideals is that, can we pursue our purpose without this fear? Can we pursue fearless purpose or love? That's one way to encapsulate what human ideals is about. And can society or civilization as a whole be an embodiment of that truth? Anyways, so going back to that, I guess the third principle of the spiritual path would be that, in terms of the left hand and the right hand path, I would suggest, again, this is a personal suggestion, this is not a claim to, absolute truth, which is that we shouldn't really see the left hand and the right hand path as like absolute opposites, and that they have much overlap. Seekers of both the left hand and the right hand have a lot to learn from one another. There's the practice of Tantra, or the art of transmutation. Again, people really confuse that for the whole trend of tantric sex, which has its uses, but tantric sex is really a very, very small portion of Tantra, and only some lineages of Tantra really, emphasize tantric sex. But Tantra is, in essence, about transmutation. Turning attachments that are supposedly negative or limitations to enlightenment, seeing the goodness in them. For example, if we're attracted to, if we're attached to sensual pleasures like movies or sex, like movies or sex or food or whatnot, that can be an indication of, our capacity to see the beauty and the wonder in life, and using that principle of beauty and wonder, can we use that gem in and of itself to transcend the fear inherent to craving and desire, and can we transform that into a state of, let's say, unconditional love and enlightenment? So that'd be another principle, which is that in reconciling the left hand and the right hand paths, we could follow the path of transmutation, and that'd be a lot easier than trying to have this internal battle with yourself and trying to, deny yourself, which I think that, if done without caution, if you do it too much, there can be the extreme of creating guilt and shame, and shaming your, some people would call it your animal self, but it really is just your natural human nature. You are a human animal, and there's nothing to be ashamed about that. One of my fellow teachers, said, Lauren, if you can go over to his YouTube channel on spirituality. As you all know, I already did an interview with him here on Human Ideals. He said that, one of the biggest spiritual delusions is, this whole New Age trend is like, oh, I'm a spirit in a body, not a body. It's like not a regular human primate. I'm a spirit. I'm a immortal spiritual being having a temporary human experience. Sorry about that, Aaron Dowdy. But anyways, no shade. But we're very, ironically, we're very disembodied, and there is a shaming of our natural tendencies, and it's not intentional. Like everyone, even New Agers, are trying to pursue the highest good wherever they can. They are following the right-hand path in their conception of it, but there is a shaming of being human, and I think that's something that we really need to address. I think spirituality as a whole, we can see that because of the conflict between the left and the right-hand path, that the truth is far from set in stone. We could say that one version of enlightenment is, to renounce all craving and attachment, but the other, which is kind of hinted at by the left-hand path, but the thing about the left-hand path is that we don't really see people who are quote-unquote fully enlightened through the left hand, because their conception of enlightenment is so different that, like the definition of enlightenment has expanded so greatly that there really isn't a consensus on it between the two paths. So however, the left hand path does hint towards the idea of transmutation, and transmuting our attachments into a so-called higher state. You know, some left-hand path adherents would say that, oh, trying to elevate yourself, this whole fallacy of higher states of consciousness is really another form of shaming the human animal. But I would disagree with that. That's one thing I disagree with Zen's teachings and whatnot. I know his path is more about deconditioning from limiting beliefs and childhood trauma and whatnot, which is also really useful, which is something that's often quite overlooked in the right-hand path. However, you know, we're not just facing inner psychological tendencies, we are burdened by external conditionings and traumas. So again, that balance of internal and external influences, that's another principle to the path that I've learned. Where's I going with this? But again, I think that one path of enlightenment that really is starting to surface, especially in this day and age, is the idea of transmutation, turning the negative into the positive. And we really have yet to see what the full potential of that as a species, if we were to become a race where, let's say, like 90% of the population is spiritually enlightened. That's a very, very far-fetched. That would be like a utopia. But, you know, I think that the way forward for that, I don't think it would be the purely right-hand path. And it couldn't, because, you know, right-hand path adherence, once you become a full renunciant, you know, you can't associate with being a layperson. You can't be a householder. You can't have a wife, a husband or wife. You can't have children. So, like, it would be the inevitable decline of the human species. And I think with human ideals, you know, one way to look at it is that, you know, from a right-hand path perspective, this may be sounding like, you know, complete delusion and silliness and ignorance, but it is like a form of misanthropy. Like, you know, because humans, like all other living beings, are susceptible to old age, sickness, and death, that, you know, societal or worldly pursuits are ultimately negated, and therefore family life and whatnot is full of attachments and cravings and neuroses, and should not be pursued at all in any degree or form. Can't be used for a higher purpose, like unconditional love and service and compassion and teaching. The teaching of wisdom, you know, that's like completely impossible. That's just a childhood, a naive, idealistic dream. You know, so in that sense, the right-hand path is kind of misanthropic or nihilistic, if you will. Not to be confused with annihilationism, by the way, which is the doctrine of complete elimination, which is a separate thing that the right-hand path also, right-hand adherents also romanticize. They think that, you know, especially in Buddhism, there's the tendency to think that, you know, if we escape all sensory experiences and, you know, annihilate ourselves into permanent nothingness, which people think is nirvana, which could be or not. I'm not going to debate that. It's not in the scope of this video. That's the ultimate peace, to not experience anything at all, which, in my opinion, I kind of think of nirvana as whether you experience sensory input or not. It's to live by your highest values without fear, and to fully transition into those values and fully leave behind your fear and so-called lower tendencies. Again, we really have to be careful when using that word, because there can be the shaming of the human nature. So it's such a delicate line. So you could say nirvana is like our highest potential without fear, our highest capacity to love without fear, whether we are living in space-time sensory existence or not. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So I just wanna go back to Leo Gura and his influence on human ideals. Some of the things he's taught, he really goes into systems of social change and how that relates to spirituality. Like, for example, the system of spiral dynamics, or levels of societal development. Systems thinking, which I've come to learn and did my own research on, super helpful in writing the college papers. As a former communication major, now transitioning to an interdisciplinary program called Narrative Multimedia Activism, which is basically a mix of communication and political science. It's super useful to introduce like spiritual concepts through the framework of the paradigm of systems thinking, which is why human ideals which is the program, I'll be introducing to USC students, is the idea of how to be a spiritual systems thinker, which is something I think that's super novel. There are some schools that are doing, like, for example, the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, which is someplace I really want to study at, probably for my graduate studies. That's basically what they do, like combining spirituality and like systems paradigms and holistic paradigms. Super cool, by the way. Again, so Leo Gura, his main influence on me is, approaching spirituality from the lens of personal development, everyday so-called worldly problems. And yeah, just how to be a force for social change in general, and thinking big picture, nuanced thinking. And one aspect about social change he talks about is conscious politics, looking beyond the left, right, liberal, conservative dichotomy, really seeing the self-deception mechanisms and the egoic mechanisms and levels of consciousness and systemic interactions that are going on behind the scenes, rather than the play of opposites between liberal and conservative ideologies that you see in mainstream or even alternative media. Looking past that, which is something I'm really grateful for. It really changed the way I now perceive politics, and getting into the occasional debate with people, even if whether you are left-leaning or right-leaning, even if you disagree with someone, you can look at it from a higher perspective and even introduce those concepts to other people gently, without trying to antagonize their beliefs. Again, that's something really cool. Has completely changed my perspective of spirituality. That's something I want to introduce to Myanmar once I do go back after college. And my highest goal with Human Ideals is to start an internationally accredited university in Myanmar, a spiritual university that will teach all these topics, including spiritual systems thinking. Anyways, so from Leo Gura, he's the main influence for Human Ideals, but I do want to move on to the spiritual teachers that have influenced my actual meditation, my inner contemplative meditation practice as a whole, and some of the actual more esoteric insights that I've gained from them. So there are a couple teachers. One is, his name is Dr. David R. Hopkins. I'm sure many of you know him. He's written multiple best-selling revolutionary books like Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, Power versus Force, The Eye of the I. I think, what was it? Oh yeah, another book, Reality, Spirituality, and Modern Man. There's so many books he's written about. Hold on a sec. Sorry about that. I just keep shifting around here. Want to get more comfortable. But anyways, yeah, he's written multiple best-selling books. He's a typical right-hand practitioner, a right-hand teacher. I do believe he was fully self-realized, fully enlightened, if you will, just by the way he writes, and just the, just the level that his concepts actually resonate with me is just completely life-changing. And I just want to delve into those concepts a little bit in this video. One big concept that he really introduced to me, perhaps the biggest one, is the difference between power versus force, which is, he published a book by that same title. So the difference between power versus force is basically the difference between, in New Age circles you would call it higher vibrational living versus lower vibrational living. He has his whole map of consciousness with different levels of emotions, like for example shame, grief, fear, apathy, pride, and then going up to, once you pass the so-called level of integrity, you go into the higher emotions like courage, neutrality, acceptance, willingness, like love, unconditional love, peace, joy, ecstasy, enlightenment. So there's this whole scale. I'm not saying that in order, but anyways, there's that whole distinction between power versus force. An analogy that Dr. Hawkins once made was, for example, power could be, power is akin to, if you have, how do I put this? Okay, so if you have a planet, right? Let's say you have the planet Earth, and you have like the atmosphere and all the other particles and whatnot, and let's say like you have, asteroids coming in and whatnot. The Earth holds all that together by gravity, and gravity is always pointing towards itself. It is always self-fulfilling. It is always a self-regulating system. It doesn't, when the gravity of the Earth goes, pulls objects, by the very nature of what it is, the objects are drawn toward it. Gravity doesn't go out from the Earth's center. It doesn't go out from the Earth and tries to reach for the asteroid or the object or whatever and pull it back in. Gravity, by nature of what it is, attracts those objects toward it. That's kind of like the idea of the law of attraction, right? If you operate from a state of unconditional love and bliss, you will attract those people and, people and places and opportunities in your life that resonate with that higher vibrational consciousness, if you will. But if you operate from a place of lack, a place of desire and fear and anger and insecurity, then you will attract those resources and you will never be able to achieve your dreams. That is the difference between power versus force, which really has changed the way I see spirituality. I used to think that the law of attraction, it's just like, it's just like positive affirmations. If you don't really have the resources, how could you actually attract them? It's all these limiting beliefs. But with the idea of power versus force, with that little analogy, like you start to see that, it's not just, delusional thinking, that there really is a higher nuance to it. If you frame it as power versus force, and another concept that elaborates on the distinction between, higher vibrational versus lower vibrational energies is the difference between content and context. So, the spiritual path, one way that Dr. Hawkins framed the spiritual path is the shift from a content-based, approach to life, the seeking of specific objects and external so-called content that will fulfill you in your life, versus context, which is changing the way you perceive life as a whole. For example, let's say content would be something like, I want a better relationship, right? I want let's say I want my dream boyfriend or girlfriend, and then you go out, you try to find that specific person. Like, I can't be fulfilled unless I have the one. So you operate from that place of desire and lack, versus with context, you start to think of yourself, okay, what is the emotion that I'm trying to find by pursuing this? It's love, right? It's the sense of wonder and joy and oneness and the lack of separation. Well then, okay, with context, you shift from wanting that specific action, seeking that specific content, which is that dream boyfriend or girlfriend, to context, which is, okay, how can I operate from a place of love? And how can I, with context, you start to operate from a place of not just wanting and demanding, but giving, adding value to other people's lives. How can I, if I look for those specific qualities of wonder and joy in other people, then how can I bring those out in other people? How can I get them to see their own capacity to love? So the way you approach life is completely different, and you don't operate from that place of lack and frustration anymore, which is characterized by desire. Just to share a bit about his map of consciousness, desire comes in at roughly 125. So just to give you an overall idea, 200 is the level of courage, or the level where you transition from pride, which is at level 175, to 200, which is the level of courage. And desire operates lower than pride at 125, and then I believe love calibrates around the 500s, and then unconditional love around the 600s, which is like, unconditional love would be like the love of Jesus Christ and like ultimate self-sacrifice, which are like, he said only 0.4% of the world population actually makes it to that level. So just to give you an idea how rare enlightenment really is and how hard it is to actually get to that level. The more you raise your consciousness, it's not only an upward hill, it's an exponential hill. So the closer you are to enlightenment, the harder you have to work to actually reach those levels of consciousness. And he said that one of the most significant leaps in levels of consciousness after you cross the level of integrity is the transition from level 500 to level 600, from love to unconditional love, to loving like selectively and only loving certain people, only loving people who give you, who fulfill your needs, to loving people for the sake of loving people. Embracing love as not just as a passing feeling or a feel-good emotion, but taking it on as an actual positionality, a way of seeing life, the affirmation of life itself and all its expression, all its beings and people. That's a very major transition that I'm still trying to make. Obviously, I'm not 100% there yet, but I do want human ideals to be an embodiment of that unconditional love, with not necessarily with the idea of escapism and transcending worldliness, but in worldliness, by seeing the sacredness of worldly pursuits, like, for example, education, entertainment, family, government, what else? Just to name a few, right? By seeing the sacredness of all these activities, human ideals embodies the belief that we can reach unconditional love and be freed from the shackles of desire and craving and attachment. These constructs, Dr. Hawkins once said that renouncing the world is more of an internal positionality that one adopts. It doesn't necessarily have to be, always embodied in your external life. Obviously, there are times that in the deconditioning process, you do have to separate yourself, to get yourself to know that you actually are able to renounce these things, but if need be. But then once you are able to let go of that attachment, you can go back into the world, not because you're codependent on the world, or because you need worldly activities to fulfill your needs and happiness, but as a practice of creating the highest unconditional love possible and trying to embody that idea of unity and non-separation between spiritual enlightenment and the relative human world. And I think that's a very, very high calibrating idea, especially with the principle of transmutation rather than, escapist transcendence. Again, so whatever you do in life, spiritual enlightenment is a shift in context, not a shift in content, which is, the specific things or the specific things that you gain in life, or the specific things that you choose to renounce. Spiritual enlightenment has nothing to do with that. It's renunciation doesn't bring about, the realization isn't caused by the renunciation. It comes together with renunciation. It happens. The renunciation allows you to see the higher positionality, but once you actually get it, you can apply it to whatever content you want to apply. Whether you are worldly or non-worldly, it doesn't matter anymore. Apparently, like Buddhists, traditional devout Buddhists may disagree with that. They may say that, oh, if you don't renounce totally, then can you say that you are really enlightened? Then you may just be deceiving yourself, that you have some bit of attachment. I can't agree or disagree with them on that. I don't really know. Maybe Dr. Hawkins is right. Maybe he's not, because he is more of an unorthodox, like Western enlightened teacher, supposedly enlightened teachers. If you look at his books, then you could really see that he has attained a very high level of realization. Even whether he's enlightened or not, especially the principles. Even without his so-called system of muscle testing. Oh yeah, I just want to share a bit about that. So Dr. Hawkins derived his map of consciousness from something called muscle testing, where it's basically you get a partner to hold out their arm, not like this, but so you get a partner to hold out their arm like this, and you press on, I can't show you right here, but you press on their wrist and say a true false statement. Like, for example, so and so calibrates at the level of desire, resist. And if you resist and their arm is strong, then this statement calibrates as true. If not, the statement calibrates as false. And you can apply it to any question you want. It has to be a yes or no question. It can't be open-ended, because obviously it's binary. It's a binary system. But so with his muscle testing system, apparently both the tester and the testee have to calibrate at over 200, or the level of integrity. Again, that's also really hard to measure. So again, I guess you can only know if you calibrate over the level of integrity if you've more or less surrendered the payoff to the lower vibrational emotions, right? All the emotions like desire, anger, pride, fear, guilt, grief, shame, below the level of 200. Dr. Hawkins said that, like someone who's trying to work up to enlightenment, who's crossed the level of integrity, it's not that they don't have the lower emotions, it's not that they don't rise, it's that they've surrendered the payoff, they've stopped living from them, they've realized that they won't get any benefit from indulging in them, and they tried their best not to, even if, because of that impersonal process of attachment. In Buddhism, it's called dependent origination, or the cycle of craving and clinging, which is hardwired into our brain. It's not completely volitional. It's not completely from free will. Because it's so ingrained into us, it can take a long time for it to be fully unwired, until you can't fully unwire it unless you're totally enlightened. But you can surrender the payoff of the lower emotions, which is something that I learned from Dr. Hawkins. Shifting from content to context, and the shift from force to power. That's really important. And for that, I'm extremely grateful for that. The shift from content to context, and not renouncing worldliness, finding the sacredness in worldly human activities and pursuits. That is one aspect of Dr. Hawkins' path that I'm really grateful for, which has really shaped what human ideals is today. Moving on, I want to share the teachings of another teacher that I've come to know, which is Anadi. He used to go by the name Aziz Christoph. His teachings are all about, unlike traditional right-hand path, he doesn't fit into the left-hand or the right-hand path. He's a very different character. His path is highly complex and nuanced. In some areas, even more so than Dr. Hawkins' path is. I can't go into too much depth here, but basically it's about having a sense of subjectivity, a sense of self beyond the mental self, beyond the psychological self and all its activities. It's more like trying to transcend and integrate your personality. So what do I mean by this, right? You could call it subjectivity beyond the psychological self, can also be non-symbolic self, or subjectivity that's not reliant on any form of constructed or arising self-imaging or self-referencing. If you notice throughout the day, if you take a careful look, you'll notice that whatever emotions you have, whether positive or negative, they're always about me. It's always like I, me, mine thoughts, and is operating at a subconscious level. It's not saying, it's not where you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this, or I'm feeling this, or I'm disappointed, or I want this, or I want that. It's not like you're telling yourself that. It's really subtle. It happens in the back of your mind. But anyway, his approach to enlightenment is transcending those self-referential thoughts by not by eliminating or trying to eliminate or unwire those thoughts as in the traditional right-hand Buddhist path, but establishing a sense of non-symbolic subjectivity. So, to demonstrate a bit, how do you do that? How do you establish that non-symbolic or pure subjectivity? Well, there's actually, his system is a very physical system. So when he says, like, open this portal of subjectivity, for example, in, I don't know if you can see here, in the back of the head, there's a portal to the back called Pure Me of Consciousness. Pure Me is basically that aspect of yourself that connects with universal or transcendent subjectivity, or the sense of other. We have, whenever we look at the world, it's not purely self or purely other, it's a relationship between self and other, the inner and the outer. Well, you can actually, rather than thinking of it as like a concept of like, oh, there is a subject-object dichotomy, no, you can actually, the novelty of his teaching is that you can actually feel that separation and the connecting of that on a physical level. So, just to demonstrate a bit, I want to share with you guys a little bit about how you open one of the first portals in his teaching, which is pure me of consciousness, as I said. So what you do is basically this practice about, he calls this the practice of meeting yourself, or feeling yourself, feeling your sense of subjectivity beyond your mental self, which is, what you do is you feel the back of your head, like the bony area on the back of your head, you feel it, and at first it's a physical sensation, but what he says is that you're not trying to feel the physical sensation, you're actually trying to feel a sense of self there. So you just wait there a bit, and don't try to hold on to a particular sensation. He emphasizes the fact that it's not about feeling a physical sensation. If you're feeling a physical sensation, then you're not doing it right. You're using external attention. If you're feeling an actual sense of self there, you're feeling pure attention. You're using pure or subjective attention. Okay, so you wait there, and you feel the sense of self there, right? So once you feel the sense of self there, as a kind of semi-sensation, you would call it. It's like you're not fully transitioned into pure subjectivity. You feel a sense of self, but again, it's a sensation of self, but it's not actually embodied subjectivity. So what you have to do is you have to merge with it. So where it's no longer a sensation of self, but you're actually embodying it. So now that's the transition from bare attention, or the bare attention of pure attention, to pure me, right? But it's not done yet. So you're in pure me, and what you do is you lean back from there, from that embodied pure me. So you lean back, and what that does, if you do it right, it'll kind of feel like, one of those like plastic funnels they use in science labs, where you like attach it to a water bottle, and then like you put stuff in it, and then it goes like down the pipe. Well, it's basically, you feel like there's a funnel attached, expanding from the back of your head, like outwards this way. So it's kind of like an invisible funnel, if you will. It expands like that as you lean back, lean back, lean back, lean back. And then after that, once you hit a certain stop point, there will be a point of roughly like 3 or 4 inches past your head where it kind of stops. Then what you have to do is that you have to, it's kind of hard to explain, but you have to shift that sense of me from behind that funnel to past that funnel. And that kind of takes some practice to actually get it right. It was really, really confusing at first. It took me over 9 months to actually understand what he was talking about. I kept trying to feel the physical sensations, which he explicitly told me not to do. I still did it anyway because I thought I was actually feeling a sense of self, when in reality I wasn't. So yeah, that was very confusing, but now I've pretty much stabilized that opening in the back of my head. But of course I do forget a lot of the time to actually embody that sense of pure subjectivity, or pure me of consciousness. So I still have a lot of work to do with that. I still have a lot of dedicated meditation to do before that embodiment becomes second nature, before I have to stop doing like dedicated like self-remembrance all the time. Okay, so just moving on from that, there's another portal I want to tell you about called Pure Me of Being, which is below your belly button. And so what you do is you breathe down, you drop the weight of your breath into your belly button, and what it'll do is, that funnel I was talking about, so it'll actually expand down into the bottom of your belly button, and what it'll do is it'll hit this ground, sort of. It'll hit this like subjective ground at where you are. It kind of feels like your sense of self, but unlike pure me of consciousness, because it's so far, it kind of feels separate, like a sensation. But it is a very weighty sensation. It carries a tiny bit of sense of self, right? So you hit that ground, and then after you hit the ground, you breathe out again, and then if you do it enough, there'll be a force, there'll be some force, and then boom, it pops out to the other side, and then you reach something called the absolute, which is like the void or nirvana that the Buddha was talking about. He uses the term the void or the absolute differently, which is actually not Buddha's conception of nirvana, because nirvana is the blowing out of all attachments and all sensory space-time experience. But his is more of a void, a resting place that you can experience in daily activity. So that's really cool. So his teaching is all about pyramid of consciousness, pyramid of being, and like combining all those. There's many centers in his teaching. This is only like the tip of the iceberg in like what he teaches. Okay. So his whole teaching is all about, combining the subjective centers and what he calls, horizontal surrender versus vertical surrender, and like combining that. The last center is pyramid of the heart, which is in yoga, or in the traditions of yoga, they call it the anahata, or the heart chakra, which is basically feeling that heart area, except you have to feel it as your sense of self, and it'll kind of feel like it's opening up a little bit. It's like a warm, fuzzy feeling, but there is a sense of self. So that center is pretty important because it allows you to experience emotional fulfillment beyond like the fluctuations and the tightness and the contractions of your solar plexus and whatnot. If you experience like grief or sadness or whatnot, tapping into the heart, pyramid of the heart, or what is traditionally called the heart chakra, can really heal that. So again, living from these subjective centers, pyramid of consciousness, pyramid of being, pyramid of the heart, and a lot of other centers, like for example, the one between your eyebrows and the eyes, which is called conscious me, and from this whole point in the front, there's the outer knower, the inner knower, conscious me, pure conscious me, fundamental me. Really, it sounds completely crazy when I'm telling you like this right now. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but basically his teaching is all about integrating and embodying all these centers at the same time. Now that sounds impossible. You may be thinking like, well, how the hell do you do that all the time? Like, you're walking around, you're embodying all these centers. That's crazy. There's like seven or more centers. Like, how do I do that? Well, it pretty much takes practice. With pure attention, unlike external attention, thing is you can direct it to multiple areas at once. It doesn't have the limitations of external attention, where you can only direct your attention to one place at a time, because it's subjective attention. It's not objective attention. It's not externalized attention. It's free to flow as it wants. And it also has that characteristic of flowing like a river. Not like catching or trying to direct attention in place. It flows on its own. When I breathe down into being, it flows into being. I'm not pushing it into being. When it flows into consciousness and leaning back, it flows out by itself. I don't have to force it to do anything. But anyways, his whole teaching is about, that transition from the mental self to the non-symbolic self, or pure subjective self, is what he calls crossing the personality threshold. And the way he's influenced my path is just the level of nuance he brings to spiritual concepts and calling out, spiritual cliches like, oh, you have to transcend or kill the ego, which is first of all impossible, at least in his view, and second of all is that's not the point of the spiritual path at all. It's not the denial of self. It's becoming intimate with yourself, really meeting your non-symbolic self on a really deep level, so that your actual personality, rather than being denied. It's not about, again, we shouldn't confuse this for denying the psychological self. It's about having a sense of non-symbolic self so that you can heal the negative tendencies of your personality and be a whole human being. Be a down-to-earth whole human being. Which I think is a really novel teaching. It's kind of an integration of both left hand and right hand. It is an idea of transmutation, but one thing he emphasizes is shying away from perfectionism. Again, the perfectionism of the right hand path and the complete indulgence of the left hand are something that he kind of avoids. And it's not even the idea of transmutation. His path can't be characterized by any three, both the left hand, the right hand, or the tantric or transmutative paths. his path doesn't fall into any one of them, which I think is so radical, and like it's really changed how we see spirituality. Combined with Dr. Hawkins's map of consciousness, it really is something else. But anyways, crossing the personality threshold. Because I spent so much of my childhood and my teenage years just building this persona, this validation seeking, insecure persona, and because I'm still working through these personality defects like narcissism and insecurity and trying to compare myself to others, and the pressure to be successful, in terms of like a status seeking level, having that sense of non-symbolic sense of self, that non-symbolic subjectivity is, man, it really does wonders. It's hard to maintain, especially sometimes I'll walk in front of other people and I kind of feel like self-anxious, but having that sense of non-symbolic self, yeah, it's a really it's a huge relief. Like you go beyond the fluctuations of your emotions, like anxiety or insecurity or grief or whatever you're facing. So that's really helpful. And lastly, I just want to touch upon not only some of the esoteric teachings I've learned, which I'll expand upon later as well, but sort of the neuroscience of spirituality. So by the neuroscience of spirituality, what I mean is some of the recent scientific studies that have been undertaken by spiritual practitioners themselves. Some teachers that are really famous are Gary Weber from the non-duality circle, where he almost completely reduced his self-referential thought after 20 years of Ramana Maharshi style self-inquiry, which is really cool. If you look at his lectures, you'll see his face is like completely calm, and he says that like when he's not speaking, he really doesn't have any thoughts, like self-referential thoughts, like blah blah thoughts, specifically what he calls blah blah thoughts, and like all of his thoughts are for basic task recognition, and they take up the so-called minimum amount of bandwidth, which is super cool. And yeah, in terms of like the non-duality circle, that's one way to look at it beyond like metaphysical doctrines of reincarnation or karma or whatnot, or like the spirit realm. If you don't believe in that stuff, that's one way to look at enlightenment, even from a right-hand perspective. Oh yeah, another spiritual teacher is Jana Dixon, with her book the Biology of Kundalini. Man, that book is, my god, like that book is so impressive. I don't know if she's like a bio major, if she's like a doctor or whatnot, but the level of scientific knowledge and her explanation of the Kundalini process, and like how the fight or flight, like self-contractive mechanisms in the body are unwired. That's one of the reasons why I took on like a raw, why I'm transitioning to like a raw vegan diet, like slowly, not completely though, because again, you do want to caution with like getting the proper amount of nutrients, which as a college student is really hard if you're only eating raw vegan. I do have to eat some cooked meals from time to time. But yeah, like her book has really inspired me to start experimenting not only with like inner practices, but like trying to unwire that self-contraction. Man, that, oh my god, like I can tell you firsthand that it's really hard to do so, especially when those like negative thoughts like insecurity or pride or anxiety arise in the brain. There's this meditation called the 6 R's by a Tranquil Wisdom Insight meditation by the monk Bhante Vimalaramsi. His practice is all about releasing that self-contraction. So the 6 R's stand for recognize the contraction when it arises, release the contraction, relax the residue of the contraction so that that's completely completely pressed out of your mind. And then re-smile, which is smile inside your mind and your body as well, and bring up a wholesome thought like compassion or whatnot, or service or unity, and then repeat the whole process. Jana Dixon's book, The Biology of Kundalini, only expands on that from like a biological sort of metabolic perspective. One thing I like about her teaching is she also dives into the super esoteric aspects of the left hand and the right hand path, because it is her book is really a sort of a glimpse of like the highest scientific potential of the transmutative approach to spirituality. So again, I think she also believes in using negative emotions, the potential in negative emotions towards the positive. With Kundalini, she talks about, especially if you look at the theme of tantric sex, she talks about like pre-egoic versus like post-egoic sex, and not to be bound by cravings and fears and insecurities and like self-indulgence too, or using sex as like the transcendence, the ultimate transcendence of separation itself, the transcendence of grief and longing and wantingness, and to a place of higher alignment. Her explaining that from a biological standpoint, again, because I've only like scratched the surface of his book. It's like 500 something pages long, and it's really, really heavy on the scientific material. So I won't get into that here. But another thing I want to touch upon is some of the more esoteric aspects of the right hand path. In her book, she talks about something called the heart knot, or Amritanadi, which is often known in like yogic Indian traditions. To explain the heart knot, it's basically apparently the root of all self-contraction within the body, the sense of where the sense of I is created. Now, in terms of the science, the neuroscience of non-duality, so, like people like Gary Weber may disagree and say that, the sense of self or self-referential thought is created in the default mode network inside the brain. There are two nodes, by the way, which are one creates the sense of self in other, and the other creates of being a self in time. Well, in the esoteric approach to the right-hand path, the sense of self is located in the heart knot, which is placed in the body 2 inches to the right of one's sternum. So basically what happens is that the more you release your self-contraction in the mind with practices like John Dixon's like holotropic breath work, or Bhante Vimalaramsi's 6 R's, tranquil wisdom insight meditation, the more you release those contractions in the solar plexus and the mind and in the heart and whatnot, the more that heart knot starts to expand, called Amritanadi, and eventually that heart knot is completely untied and you escape self-contraction and even reincarnation itself, and you become fully enlightened, the Buddha. And only a few people in history have only untied it. There's some figures like, sorry, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, there's people like the Buddha, and recently I came across an Arhat, a supposed Arhat named Ajahn Mahabua. There's Adida, who's famous for talking about the heart knot, and yeah, so it's a very esoteric, not very well understood thing in terms of spirituality, and especially in the New Age. I don't think many people know about it and what it is. But again, science hasn't really discovered what that heart knot really is. John Dixon does try to explain it from a scientific view. She thinks that the heart knot expands from the flow of cerebrospinal fluid into the heart and the bloodstream, which is expanding the actual physical heart. But the way I felt it in terms of my meditation practices, it's more of an energetic expansion. So it kind of feels like there's actual sort of like a clear. There's this teacher named L. Ron Gardner. He talks about this meditation of plugged-in presence, or it's basically about establishing whole bodily presence and staring into the void of reality to tap into this light energy, and which is supposed to expand the heart knot. And in my own personal experience, it kind of feels like light energy entering the spot. If you see like 2 digits to the right of one's sternum, rather than like a sort of like biological fluid. So I don't really know what's going on with that. Some practices you can do to try opening the heart knot is one is you can turn, if you look here, you can turn to the right where the heart knot is located. Turn your head to the right, go around your head with your hand, take your hand, and there's a muscle from your neck which extends to the bottom of one's ear. There's like I don't know what that muscle is called, but basically you turn, you take your 3 fingers, you press here below your ear, and you touch that, you press on that spot in the heart. And if you do it long enough, you'll feel that place slowly expanding and filling with clear light energy, subtly filling with clear light energy, depending on how much contraction releasing you've done, whether it's with John Dixon's own breathing exercises, or like there's a lot of breathing exercises she talks about, like primal releasing and big fun breathing and holotropic breath work. There's a lot of it I won't go into, but you can also release self-contraction by Bhante Vimalaramsi's meditation method, L. Ron Gardner's plugged-in presence or Holy Communion method. It's a method he's derived from his book Electrical Christianity, which I think is really esoteric. One of my favorite books on spirituality in general. Really, really good. So again, combining all these teachings, there's David R. Hawkins. In summary, there's David R. Hawkins, Anadi, people like John Dixon, Gary Weber, L. Ron Gardner, Adi Da. All these people have come to influence my spiritual path and the idea of transmutation, which has inspired human ideals and what it is today. And I really hope to be sharing these principles with you guys in my 10-week curriculum for human ideals, which I will be teaching and sharing and discussing with my fellow students for all really seriously dedicated spiritual seekers at USC. Yeah, before I close off, I just want to say that the biggest takeaway that I've had from the spiritual path wasn't these teachings, surprisingly. Some of the best moments in my spiritual path were, just get more comfortable. Okay. So the biggest highlight in my spiritual path was not the teachings themselves. Like, I just want to emphasize, the biggest highlight in my path was getting to experience that part of myself, beyond these teachings, knowing that part of myself that's, beyond all the external conditionings and, other people's beliefs of what I should be and whatnot, including my parents or my other spiritual teachers, that place within me that is free from all external conditioning, even in reality itself, that place that only I can know, that I can't really share with anyone else. In Human Ideals, I call this my intimate. If you read the mission statement, it says, what is the most intimate part of your existence? It is your home beyond everything you've ever learned in reality, untouched by your virtues, unmoved by your flaws. That place inside of you, experiencing that for me it really has been the biggest gift of my life. If my parents hadn't raised me, as a devout Buddhist, I wouldn't have even thought of giving the spiritual path, a thought or even a second thought, and without the spiritual path, I wouldn't have met my intimate and felt, this deep connection to my intimate through these spiritual practices and to humanity as a whole. And this unity between my intimate, I call it my intimate because of the sheer amount of intimacy and unconditional self-love that I feel in connecting to this innermost part of myself, and which allows me to feel a love for humanity, and feeling the beauty of my you know, of me just being a regular, ordinary human being, and with all my, you know, virtues and all my flaws, you know, experiencing the trials and tribulations of life, you know, seeing the wonder of life in these worldly aspirations, whatever, however you want to call it. That sense of ordinariness comes from my intimate, and that unity between, you know, the sacredness of my intimate and the sacredness of worldly aspirations and humanity as a whole is what human ideals is trying to represent, and it is a testament to the vision that spiritual escapism can be healed, and that hopefully humanity will one day reach its highest potential of being a quote-unquote ego-transcendent civilization, however you want to term it. Anyways, guys, before moving on, I just wanted to insert this clip in here at this point. I kind of left something out as I was shooting this video. I just wanted to talk about another one of my biggest spiritual obstacles that I'm trying to overcome now. Aside from, you know, this validation seeking, insecurity, greed, pride, jealousy, whole aspect of myself, that negative programming that I'm trying to decondition it and unwire through my meditation, through Bhante Vimalaramsi's meditation methods, or John Dixon's work or whatnot, or Gary Weber's self-inquiry. Another one is I've come to notice that, you know, especially in my middle and high school years, I've kind of had this sense of codependency of specifically with regards to love, and like trying to find love, whether it be romantically or non-romantically, trying to find love, and that, I guess that ties into validation itself, like outside of my own existence, you know, outside of that most intimate part of myself. Yeah, if you look at human ideals, I reference my intimate quite a lot. At this point in the video, I'm not sure if I've already referenced my intimate or not, but I will get to it by the end of the video, depending on when you're watching this. Anyway, so it's this idea of love and codependency, or whether we can have love without being codependent on another person for our well-being, whether they are with us or whether we are separate from them, whether through, you know, life circumstances or the inevitable old age, sickness, death, you name it. But yeah, so anyway, going back to Dr. Hawkins' teachings, he talks about this idea of transcending love as an attachment, that love as an attachment is really an expression of those negative energies beyond the level of integrity, like mainly desire, grief, and fear. So that a mishmash of that is, you know, our romantic conception of love. Not that there's anything wrong with romantic love, but romantic love is often characterized by codependency and sort of clinginess and dependency and needing the other person, whether it's for validation or self-worth, and without them your life is completely meaningless, you know. In the biology of Kundalini, John Dixon talks about, I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but John Dixon talks about the trans-egoic sex. You could apply this to, I guess, to any form of love. Trans-egoic love, non-codependent love, a complete love that is completely liberating for both parties. And with my own spiritual journey, the thing I'm trying to overcome is that intense self-contraction that comes from grief. And for me, it's not so much the grief that I've already experienced, because I haven't really had like close family members to me die. You know, I've had relatives die, but no one that I'm like extremely close with, like my mother or my father or my aunts and uncles, my grandparents. They're still very much alive, so like I'm really thankful for that. But you know, to have a love that is free from attachment, I think is super rare, even in today's society. Even if we, you know, promote this idea of independence and individuation, you know, I think there's a part of us that still is very codependent and tries to hide it through various means, and we can get very good at it. But I think if I were to say what this type of love would look like, again, I don't have much experience in this area, just to let you know. I would say that this type of love, rather than being, Dr. Hawkins says, is like chasing after a certain emotion or a heightened romantic, like, neurochemical sensation. It's a positionality on life, and it comes from your inner values, which are shaped by your intimate, and how you overcome challenges, obstacles to the affirmation of life together through your intimate. I think that's what really characterizes this idea of really unconditional love as well, whether you are together or whether you are in separation. In New Age circles, you call this like fifth dimensional, like higher vibrational love, you would say. That I think that's something that I think is really valuable for human ideals. And I guess that a part of the reason why I'm really into, the vision for human ideals, spiritual enlightenment, as being integrated into worldliness and worldly pursuits rather than being escapist or transcendent, is because of that, familial aspect of humanity, continuing the human race through our families and through our personal and unconditional love, the two forms of love not being mutually exclusive. Love as the joy of existence and the joy of living as a whole, and even in its horrors, even in the presence of sickness, death, decay, hostilities like war and whatever you want to call it, our personal intimacy or personal personal relationships, romantic or non-romantic, that is something that I think, in order to reach that level of love, you have to overcome that knot of self-contraction in yourself. It's like that pit of, darkness, and that even in that tiny knot of contraction, which happens over and over again whenever you think about the fear of losing your loved ones, what your life is going to be like after that. The light of your intimate, I think, is what fills that hole, and from that place you can love from complete independence, complete freedom. And I think in my spiritual journey, aside from unwiring those, validation-seeking, self-referential mechanisms, another one is untying that contraction, not only inside the mind but inside the heart as well. Overcoming that, inner pit, that inner void, being able to fully express the values of my intimate, being able to fully integrate my intimate with, human worldly aspirations from a place of independence, not from a place of codependence or desiringness, or, a life purpose from external pursuits and temporary pleasures. Reaching that state of unconditional love is one of the biggest goals of my spiritual enlightenment. And before I die, I do want to reach that place where I can love from a place of independence, whether personal or impersonal. Yeah. And I just wanted to add that to this video before I sign off. Yeah, I didn't get to touch on that. Another teaching that I kind of left out in this video is there's this website called puredhamma.net. That's puredhamma.net, which is it's founded by a Sri Lankan guy who apparently found the so-called original teachings of Buddhism even earlier than Theravada Buddhism, and he found this translation of the words anicca, dukkha, anatta, which is usually translated as impermanent suffering, non-self, but the real meaning is a lot deeper than that. And I want to tie this idea back to the concept of like love and codependency and unconditional love, in that the first word, anicca, A-N-I-C-C-A, it's typically translated as impermanence, but it really means uncontrollability. Well, despite the appearance of controllability, things are worldly things, especially worldly things, temporal things, are uncontrollable and therefore undesirable. That really relates to the fact that, your loved ones could die at any time. Separation could happen at any time. And in spite of that separation, how do you still love them? How do you, rather than renouncing love, how do you love more? How do you have the capacity to love even in separation, so that you ultimately transcend separation? Another idea is the principle of dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, dukkha, or suffering. But its deeper meaning, the way he translated it, is behind the appearance of pleasure, or behind ordinary worldly pleasure. Again, his emphasis is really on behind the appearance of worldly pleasure is hidden suffering. Dukkha is not just suffering, but it's hidden, unseen suffering. Suffering that we try to shy away from, that we don't want to uncover, that we subconsciously know exists, but we're living in denial, basically. That kind of denial-based suffering is dukkha. It's not just suffering. And yeah, living in codependency, although that feels like love, is really attachment, because the insight I've really gained from dukkha is that kind of love, the same love that causes you to not just grieve, but fall into like a permanent, everlasting depression once your loved one dies, not seeing the beauty and the joy of life even in their passing, is the very same love that causes you to be jealous and insecure and angry once they, let's say, they move on to another person, and then rather than being happy for their happiness, you're resentful of them because they no longer feel they no longer feel an inner lack of yours, and so you're relying on them for your fulfillment, for your validation. And dukkha really exposes that. It really drives me to find that, ego transcendent love, whatever that is. And the last one is anatta, which is anatta, which is typically translated as non-self, but it really is, the deeper meaning is I like to translate as one is hidden, one is hopeless in the rebirth process. Rebirth is not just on the macrocosmic level of literal reincarnation, but rebirth on a moment-to-moment basis, the rebirth of self-contraction, of resistance to reality. When you realize that your patterns of, codependency and whatnot, your typical way of viewing life, it just isn't working, that insight is the only way your body actually surrenders. Like, even if you don't see that, what I've realized with Dr. Hawkins' work, his work is based around letting go, that here's a contraction, right, in the body, and if you just let go that stack of whatever energy you're facing, like below the level of integrity, that it'll eventually just go away if you just keep letting go. But that, unfortunately, isn't really the case, as I've discovered. That alone isn't enough. You have to have the insight on a deep emotional level that this really isn't working, that I really am hopeless and hopeless in the rebirth process, not just conceptually, but really feel it in your heart. That's what gets your body to automatically surrender. You don't manually surrender. It's like, oh, let go, let go, let go. No, you're not just manually releasing. Your body gives up. And that's what allows you to an ego transcendent. Again, when I say ego, I use it in a very light way. Ego, you could say, is a resistance to reality. It's an activity, as Adida defines it, the activity of self-contraction. So I just wanted to add that. What I've tried to discover about unconditional love, and one of the biggest hurdles in my spiritual path. And how that relates to how that really shines a new light on how I was raised in a Theravada Buddhist household, and the three marks of existence, so-called anicca, dukkha, anatta, what I used to believe as impermanent suffering, non-self, has really taken on a much deeper meaning, and surprisingly, that actually relates to the expansion of the heart knot. I don't know if I again, I don't know when I'm the thing is, I don't know when I'm putting this clip in the video, so I forget, you may be wondering, if I haven't touched on concepts like the heart knot and whatnot at this point. So if not, you can just keep watching and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, it relates to the expansion of the heart knot and the release of self-contraction in the body. But that's really interesting. But anyways, I just wanted to add that in there, and whenever you're watching this in the video, you can just keep continuing. And yeah, I just wanted to add that spiritual hurdle I've been facing and how I've been trying to overcome it. To see the positivity of life, to affirm life, even with its negativity, not in spite of its negativity, but in its cycles of aliveness and then death and decay, to affirm all of it, to not leave any one of it. I read Nietzsche's book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He talks about the will to power and amor fati, which is the love of fate and like eternal recurrence. If you were to live this life over and over again, by way of there being even a single positive moment in life, that all other moments, whether good or bad, are justified. Human ideals takes that a step further in that, by nature of the single positive moment in life, that one can see all other moments as positive in and of themselves and become the affirmation of existence through your worldly pursuits, through your shared humanity. That's what Human Ideals aspires to be, and I think Human Ideals is a reflection of my intimate. And for that, I can't express enough how grateful I am for my intimate, no matter what my fears are. If I could say that, if I even, let's say I drop dead, right, and I don't attain enlightenment, I never find the answer, the ultimate answer to suffering or my suffering or whatnot, the ultimate truth of life, the best way to live, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't attain my goals, even if I live in fear of not attaining my goals, there is a part of me that's free from all of that. Not free from all of that, not ostracizing or demeaning those things, but seeing the beauty of those things. Immanence, not only escapism or transcendence. True transcendence is immanence. It is immanent in those things, in those fluctuations, in both the positivity and the so-called negativity of life. That's what my intimate is. And I think that if you take away one thing from this video, it's that as a spiritual seeker, beyond all these teachings, first and foremost, connect with the most intimate part of yourself, your being. Beyond your virtues, beyond your flaws, beyond what you were told to hope for by society, beyond what you were taught success is by your parents, your family, your friends, your peers, your workplace, whatever. Beyond your supposed flaws, and even beyond and within, the inevitabilities of old age, sickness, death, separation. Having the audacity, the capacity to love life in these things, not beyond these things, not in spite of these things, in these things. True immanence is what your is what your intimate is all about. And from that place, you can tap into the full potential of your spiritual teachings, and you can be grateful for your entire journey in every step of the moment, whether you become enlightened or not, even in the moment of your enlightenment or not, however likely or unlikely that is. Whether you choose to be a worldling, a householder, or a complete renunciate, or anything in between, it doesn't matter. The first and foremost aspect of your path that is important is your intimate. And if you live and die by that, if you set your existential values from that, there is nothing you have to be afraid about in life. And from that, you can escape your frustration, your sense of lack, your isolation. And you don't have to create a coping mechanism like I did in the early years of my life by seeking validation or being insecure, people pleasing, building these subconscious mechanisms of trying to unwire these mechanisms of pride and insecurity and jealousy, which every seeker will have to do. No matter how traumatic or untraumatic their past was, it doesn't matter. Every seeker will have to unwire that, and it'll be hell at times. It'll be hell, trust me. It's not going to be fun at times. Sometimes you'll really doubt yourself as to whether, is this really me? Am I really defined by these, so-called lower tendencies? Again, not shaming the human primate. Or am I something more? Am I something that can see the beauty of these things, all aspects of my path, both the light and the dark, from my intimate? And can I be an ordinary human being that has the capacity to affirm all of life? Again, being like a so-called like a spiritual superhero, a spiritual avenger, if you will. Like human ideals is like, our goal is kind of like to build a team, like a species of spiritual avengers, that our mission is to affirm existence in everything we do, in all our worldly aspirations. Can you be a spiritual avenger? Can you live by the existential values of your intimate? Again, if you look at the Human Ideals website, you'll see I published an article where when I was in the non-duality phase, before I got into like the esoteric aspects of like David R. Hawkins, Anadi, when I was just first getting into Leo Guru, I came up with these principles called transcendence, transmutation, non-exclusivity, personal understanding, existential openness, surrender into being, infinite dimensions, and inner truth. And the common thread to all of that is having that connection to your intimate. If you can create a set of values like that by your own, create something novel, that really is a reflection of your intimate. You have nothing to worry about as a spiritual seeker. And I want to end on that note. And maybe my wish for all you, spiritual seekers out there is to create a purpose that motivates you, that moves you to your core, like Human Ideals does for me. And hopefully you can repay the gift of your intimate through your life purpose. For every parent or family member or friend or spiritual teacher or stranger that you come across in life, repay the gift of your intimate to them and feel your shared humanity through your intimate and affirm existence as a whole. Yeah. And this is basically my entire spiritual journey from now to this point. I will be updating you guys maybe a couple months from now. I'm not going to give you the entire backstory like I did this time, but I'll share some new insights that I've obtained. But for now, I just wanted to share my message of my entire story, the challenges I've gone through, and how I've been able to meet my intimate through my spiritual journey. And that is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. Yeah. I don't know what to say from here. Yeah, I guess this is it. That's my spiritual journey, and I will share more with you about the insights that I've gained and what I'm doing with Human Ideals in my next update on my spiritual journey. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I will see you guys in the next video. Catch you later.